The year was 1967. In the quiet wilderness of the Yorkshire Dales, 6 amateur cavers ventured into an uncharted limestone passage during what was supposed to be a routine exploration. The skies were clear, spirits were high, but by nightfall, a torrential storm would flood the caverns, and one by one, the men would begin to vanish. There were no official rescue reports, no newspapers picked it up. And today, over half a century later, even the locals barely whisper about it. The descent was documented briefly in a personal journal recovered weeks later, its pages warped by moisture and marked with cryptic sketches. It's the only trace we have, but why did these men enter that cave in the first place? What did they encounter underground? And why was the entire event buried, forgotten by time? This isn't just a ghost story. This is a real case. And what you're about to hear might change how you see the earth beneath your feet. If you're into mysterious true stories, lost history, and unnerving tales that make you question reality, go ahead and hit that like button. Subscribe for more strange British files just like this, and share it with someone who's not afraid of the dark. Part 1. The Men Who Disappeared. There's something about the British countryside, especially in places like the Yorkshire Dales, that feels older than time itself. Not just ancient in the geological sense, but haunted by the footsteps of those who came before. You can stand in the middle of a valley, surrounded by nothing but wind, stone walls, and sheep, and still feel like you're not alone. In the spring of 1967, 6 men set out to explore one such place. They weren't professionals. They didn't have government backing or fancy equipment. They were hobbyists, weekend cavers who had done this dozens of times before. Friends from Leeds and Manchester who met through climbing clubs and outdoor groups. Their names were Alan Godfrey, -34, former Royal Navy engineer David Kilner, 28, primary school teacher Roy Marsh, 40, geology enthusiast and part-time historian Malcolm Hill, -25, student and aspiring novelist Eric Stokes, 31, local to the Dales, knew the terrain better than anyone, and Peter Lyle, 22, the youngest on his first major caving trip. They were good men. They had no death wish, no desire to prove themselves on dangerous terrain. They simply wanted to explore a system near Troller's Gill, a narrow limestone gorge known for strange acoustics and even stranger local legends. According to the accounts we've pieced together from old letters, recovered field notes, and the one surviving journal, this trip wasn't planned with danger in mind. They were after a rumored side chamber that wasn't on any ordnance survey map, something Roy Marsh claimed he'd read about in a 19th century mining record that collapsed. Passageway near an old lead vein. The group joked about finding buried treasure, but no one really believed it. What they did believe was that the cave they were heading into, an offshoot of Hellgill Cave, might connect to a larger, undocumented system. That morning, they parked 2 cars off a gravel track, left a note on the dashboard saying, "Gillpath Survey, back by Sunday," and carried their gear into the hills. They never came back. Part 2, Inside. The limestone macy, for those unfamiliar with caving. It's worth understanding the environment these men were entering. The Yorkshire Dales sit atop one of the largest expanses of Carboniferous limestone in the UK. Underneath its green hills lie thousands of miles of tunnels, chambers, and underground. Rivers carved over millennia by acidic rainwater dissolving the rock. It's a geological Swiss cheese. Caves here aren't like the dry, dusty caverns of American folklore. They're wet, narrow, unpredictable, and often pitch black within minutes of entry. One wrong turn, and you're disoriented. A slight misstep, and you're stuck between jagged walls, unable to move your arms. The group entered around noon. According to the found journal, they marked their path using red chalk and a basic compass heading. They joked, they sang. They were in high spirits. At one point, Peter wrote, "Marsh thinks he sees shimmer on the rock, calls it fairy dust. Probably damp." It was the last cheerful thing recorded. Deeper into the cave, they encountered signs of old mining rusted tools embedded in limestone, rotting wood beams, and in one chilling detail, a boot. Not old enough to be Victorian, but not fresh either. "No foot inside," Peter noted. "Eric doesn't want to keep going. Says the air's off." Marsh insists we're close to a breakthrough. Then came the storm, part 3, when the earth swallows. So above ground, it came in quickly. Locals recall the skies darkening just after 3 p.m. A freak spring squall that moved in from the Irish Sea, dumping over an inch of rain within an hour. In the hills, this isn't just weather, it's danger. Because the limestone terrain acts like a funnel, water doesn't sit, it plunges. Surface streams overflow. Dry gullies become torrents. And caves? They become death traps. Inside the cave. The first sign was the sound, Peter wrote. "Thought I heard the wind, but it was wet, like a breath behind us." The water didn't come all at once. It seeped in, rising steadily. They turned back, but the entry tunnel was already flooded. A narrow crawl space they'd used on the way in now surged with black water. Too forceful to fight, they were trapped. They moved forward, hoping to find higher ground or a secondary exit. And that's when things changed. Malcolm, the aspiring writer, described it best. His entry smeared and water damaged, but legible. It's not just the cave. Something's in here, watching. Eric won't speak. He just stares, then silence. The rest of the journal is blank for 5 pages. When it resumes, it's written in different hand. Part 4. The journal arrêté 3 weeks after the storm. A shepherd found it wedged between 2 stones on the slope above Troller's Gill Dry on the inside, as if carefully sealed. The man turned it into the police. The police turned it over to the parish vicar, who passed it to a friend in a university geology department, and then it vanished into private hands. Only recently, decades later, did scanned copies of the original surface online, anonymously leaked from a Yorkshire heritage archive. That's how we know the journal continued and grew darker. The new handwriting is presumed to be Alan's older, more technical, less emotional. It details a tunnel with walls that shimmer and torchlight sounds of water in directions that made no geographical sense, and then a chamber. Alan called it the Hex Room. It's shaped unnaturally like a man-made hexagon. The walls are smooth, dead silent. Even our breath doesn't echo. Kilner got nosebleeds just being near the center. The team stayed in the chamber overnight, or what they thought was overnight. No one had a working watch. Time started to unravel. Peter went missing first. They assumed he'd wandered during a toilet break, but his gear was left behind. Then Malcolm began mumbling in his sleep, saying names none of them recognized. By the end of the second day, only Alan, Kilner, and Eric were left. Then came the light. Part 5. The last man Hotel locals did search for a while. Mostly friends and curious hikers. No official rescue was ever recorded. But then Alan showed up. 3 months after the group vanished. A man stumbled into a small village outside Skipton, barefoot and confused. He couldn't remember how he got there. He was severely dehydrated, with a broken wrist and deep abrasions on both hands. No ID, no bag, no shoes, but the police recognized him. It was Alan Godfrey. When questioned, he couldn't recall what happened inside the cave, only fragments. He remembered light without a source, a humming. He said he felt folded, like time itself had been around him. The doctors chalked it up to trauma and dehydration. But here's the part that matters. Alan never caved again. He moved to Cornwall, changed his name, refused all interviews until 1991. That year, He gave a short, anonymous interview to a university student writing a thesis on British cave folklore. In it, he said, "We weren't supposed to go in there. That place wasn't hollow. It was. Waiting." Asterisk final section. The unfinished Emma Powell Godfrey passed away in 2007. No obituary, no family statement. His death went unnoticed except by a single man. Reemerged's nephew, Thomas, now in his 60s, had grown up hearing whispers of Uncle Roy's last cave. For years, he assumed it was just an exaggeration. But when Alan's belongings were auctioned off quietly in Cornwall, Thomas found something inside a rusted metal lockbox. A single torn map dot. It was hand-drawn. Faint outlines. Scratched annotations in pencil. A hexagon marked with a red X, a series of winding paths that don't appear on any known cave survey in the Yorkshire Dales, and in one corner, scribbled hastily in Alan's unmistakable writing, "One came back, but I left part of me behind." Thomas handed the map to a local historian, then changed his mind the next day and asked for it back. He now refuses to talk about it. Multiple attempts have been made since the 2000s to retrace the team's final route using satellite mapping and cave dive records. Every expedition either gets rerouted by collapses or reports unusual equipment failures deep underground. Some have claimed to hear humming. Others have turned around without ever explaining why. But here's what's truly strange. In 2019, a LiDAR scan of the area near Troller's Gill showed an anomaly, an empty space under the earth roughly the size and shape of a cathedral, with 6 narrow tunnels branching out. Geologists brushed it off as a natural void, but those who've seen Alan's map say it's the Hex Room. Asterisk. Epilogue. The Forgotten Descent. What happened to those 6 men in the spring of 1967 will likely never be fully understood. There are no death certificates for 5 of them, no burial sites, just a missing persons report quietly archived in a now defunct police office in Skipton and a journal. Water damaged, fragmented, but real. Some believe the story is an elaborate hoax. Others think it's a metaphor for Cold War experimentation or military tunnels hidden beneath the Dales. A few suggest something far stranger, that certain places on Earth aren't meant to be mapped, that the land remembers things older than man. That caves. Dream. Whatever the truth, the entry still stands weathered, overgrown, but untouched. Hidden in plain sight. Waiting. And if one day you find yourself walking the misty hills near Troller's Gill and hear something below your feet, a whisper, a hum, a shifting in the limestone, remember this. Some descents are never truly finished, and some stories aren't meant to be found.